And welcome back to Fresh Outlook, everybody. I'm TWB. Now for some news across the pond. The UK Conservative Party chairman has indicated that the UK, they might leave the European Union provided that the British Prime Minister fails to renegotiate the terms of their membership status. Let's take a look.
British Prime Minister David Cameron says he will offer his citizens a vote on whether to leave the European Union if his party wins the next election. He said that public disillusionment with the EU was at an all-time high.
Now, I say to the British people, this will be your decision. And when the choice comes, you'll have an important choice to make about our country's destiny. Now, I understand the appeal of going it alone, of charting our own course, but it will be a decision we will have to take with cool heads. Proponents on both sides of the argument will need to avoid exaggerating their claims. Of course, Britain could make her own way in the world, outside the EU if we chose to do so. So could any other member state. But the question we'll have to ask ourselves is this: is that the very best future for our country?
At home, opposition parties say Cameron's decision is based on party and not national interests.
When he said he was against an in-out referendum, is not the situation in Europe, but the situation in the Tory party. Why doesn't he admit it? He's been driven to it not by the national interest, but been dragged to it by his party.
The stated possibility of a referendum is expected to further frustrate other EU member states.
The Commission has been consistent in stating that provided Britain wants to remain in the European Union, it is very much in the European interest and in the UK's own interest for Britain to be an active member at the centre of the European Union.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel says a fair compromise is the need of the hour, though Britain's wishes can be contemplated.
All right, with that, I'd like to introduce a very special guest who's actually joining us now via Skype from across the pond, all the way from London. Rabia Spiker. She's a correspondent for the Weekly Zaman. It's a newspaper in the UK. Rabia, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Welcome, welcome. Great to have you. So let's just take a couple steps back. Briefly tell us, for those who aren't familiar, what exactly is the EU, the European Union, and is it working so far?
Okay, well, the EU was set up originally as a free trade area, but more and more it's become a kind of political superstate. And that's really the problem, that a lot of people feel that they're not able to make their own laws. They have to apply laws that are made centrally. And they feel that that's not necessarily in their national interests. And here in the UK, there's been a lot of, there's basically been a lot of skepticism towards the EU for a long, long time, and particularly in the Conservative Party. And that's been growing recently. And there's been support for the UK Independence Party growing, which is, I think that's partly what's pushing Cameron to make this referendum.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of controversy over his announcement that he'd like to leave, or he'd like to have the UK leave. What are the major consequences if that does follow through?
It's really difficult to say. I mean, in fact, it's not, what he's said is not a very likely scenario at the moment, because first of all, he has to get re-elected, which he's not really very popular at the moment. The Conservatives have brought in a lot of changes to the National Health Service, to welfare, which are very unpopular. So, you know, the likelihood of him actually getting in again in 2015 is quite low. And then he's saying that this referendum would only take place in 2017. After he'd renegotiated or tried to renegotiate the UK's position in the EU. So it's quite a long shot, really.
Right. I mean, it is a far ways off. But let's say he doesn't get elected, going with your scenario. Do enough people in the UK support the measure? I mean, regardless of who the Prime Minister is.
Actually, I don't think so, because quite often in polls, over 50% will say that they would leave the EU, but just whenever the EU actually comes into the news and it actually becomes more of an issue and more likely, those figures plummet. And for example, currently, with what's going on at the moment, with Cameron having announced this, it's only 34% of people who say that they would leave.
Right.
So,
okay.
I don't think really. I think a lot of it is actually bravado, to be honest.
Right, bravado.
Yeah.
I like how you say that. Something I did want you to clarify, shed some light on. Grant Shapps, he's the UK Conservative Party chairman, saying we may leave the EU if we do not get powers back. Can you shed some light on what those powers are that he's referring to?
Yeah, basically, basically the EU is becoming, moving towards greater integration to the extent that it's almost becoming like one state, with the same laws. And it's a kind of one-size-fits-all approach, which doesn't necessarily work for individual countries. So, for example, at the moment, there's something on, I can't think of. But basically, it's basically the laws that we want to have more say over.
Okay.
Yeah.
James, he's one of our other panelists. He has a question.
Yeah, Rabia, thank you for giving us so much insight on some of the things that are going on there. I wonder if you could do two things. First, can you give our viewers a sense of what the relationship is between the Conservative Party in the UK and the Conservative Party and conservative movements in the US? I mean, are those two things the same? Kind of what's the kind of compare and contrast of those?
I can't really say. I don't know enough about the US, really. The Conservatives are centre-right, and I can't really comment.
That's all right. Because the reason why I asked the question is because when people first started talking about the EU, there was a lot of optimism around the euro and around the economic benefits of it. And now that the global economies are so complicated and so depressed, it seems like people are talking more and more about getting out of it. And so I wonder how politics plays into some of those things.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think at the moment, over 40% of our exports are to the EU, so it's a really important trading partner. But people are saying that that's going to go down, and there are other markets opening up, so it won't be so important in the future. But I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, Rabia, I just want to thank you for spending some time with us. What time is it there?
7:42.
Oh, wow.
Oh, all right. Terrific.
Is it as cold over there? Is
it colder? Right. If it's as cold as it is here, you need some tea. I think we all need some tea. Well, thank you again for joining us. It's been very insightful.
Okay, thank you.
I guess if we have a couple seconds, let's just discuss what we think, panel. Is the U.S. benefited by the EU, and specifically if Britain does leave, does it affect us? I mean, Obama has come out, or his people have come out saying that they highly are against this, that this is not a good move, internationally speaking.
Yeah, for us, it's to our advantage for the European Union to stay together. Remember, the global economy is really intertwined right now. Part of the reason, Germany is one of the strongest economies in the EU. They're not getting out because so many people owe them so much money. And so our debt, their debt, and all the sort of ways in which we're trying to recover the global economy are kind of tied to this. What's going to happen if the UK leaves, even though I think long-term there may be some benefits for them economically, that will sort of scare off a lot of investment. It'll scare people who own some of this debt. And so it will not be a good thing for the recovery of the global economy if the UK gets out.
But it's not really working now. I mean, and why not let Turkey in? I mean, forget England. Let Turkey in. I mean,
are they better off not in there? I mean,
well, and 40%. I mean, Turkey gives 40% of exports to the EU, and they're being treated very unfairly. So if they go, they go. But it is tough, and I think that Rabia said that talking about one size fits all, it's very difficult to make that work, and it has morphed into something else. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's working very well. What if they do split? I'm not so sure it's a bad thing.
I think short term it could be really bad, but you're right. Long
but if so, put Turkey in there.
Right. All right. With that, I do want to talk to toss to another piece specifically about unemployment in the Eurozone. Let's take a look.
The unemployment rate across the Eurozone hit 11.8% in November, with the number of people out of work nudging 19 million. The 19th rise in a row represents an increase of more than 2 million on the dole compared with a year ago. The jobless numbers exceeded 26 million for the first time across the European Union, which includes Britain and Poland. Hit by a property market bust and riddled with bad bank debt, Spain recorded the highest unemployment rate at 26.6%, worse even than bailed-out Greece. Italy's jobless rate remains at a record high, while youth unemployment jumped to a new peak above 37%. Southern and peripheral countries whose governments and companies face higher interest rates or lack access to market financing continue to struggle.
Yeah, I mean, it is just a devastating situation over there. I actually lived in Spain for some time, and to hear that they have the highest unemployment, right? I mean, back then I thought there was a lot of unemployment, so I can't even imagine what it feels like now. The U.S. Assistant Secretary for European Affairs warned that referendums have often turned countries inwards, and that's what the Prime Minister is looking to do. I mean, to me, he just seems like a bully. Kind of like, I'm not getting what I want, so I'm going to threaten to leave. And good luck, guys, because I know this is going to start a domino effect.
Germany and UK, I mean, they're having to carry folks that aren't getting it done. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's sort of, you can understand their angst.
Should we dismantle? Should the EU be dismantled? What do you think, Paris?
I'd be honest with you. I haven't been following this that closely.
Okay.
I've been so much into the immigration, but I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, my vote would be for them to stay together. I think it's so complicated. We're entering into this conversation during a political campaign in the UK, and so
it
does
strange things happen in politics. He's
Right.
speaking to his party, those on the right in the UK who are much more invested in nationality and nationalism, and so he's got to talk to them in order to get elected, and so that's why we're having this challenge. But the dismantling of the EU right now, in a very vulnerable global economic recovery, is not good for the American economy, which is why I'd like to see them stay together, at least until the debt process kind of works through, until Germany is made whole again, and until some of these countries get back up on their feet. I think then you can sort of try to revisit it and rethink it. But again, in the beginning, people were interested in this and excited about it because of the economic benefits. And so now that the global economy is so fractured and so vulnerable, I think that's why you're seeing a lot of tension and angst around it. But
isn't that the argument maybe for it to disband in a way? Because I mean, these countries, I mean, are so different. I mean, Spain is, and Germany, and UK, and Turkey. It's all very, very different. So and having this, everyone had the euro, and half the time they're in Greece. I mean, look, UK, they used to use sterling. So.
Does the UK gain, sort of economically speaking, compared to what it gives back to the EU? I mean,
they don't think they are.
Right. I don't think they are either. I mean, you can't blame them for at least looking at it.
But also look at the timeline, 2017. I mean, this is quite a ways,
ways
off.
ahead. And again, the global recovery might be in a better place at that point.
Right. You think you're carrying Greece. You're thinking, why are we doing this? We're having our own struggles. We need to take care of our own. I mean,
it's
so
more
you can
Germany
understand
carrying
the
Greece than the UK.
True. That's true. But, especially Germany. You're right.
Yes.
Well, speaking of carrying, I have to carry
us
to a break.
Everyone's carrying Greece.
I'm going to carry us to a United States break. Just ahead, we're going to be talking smartphones and the huge impact they've had on our lives for better and for worse. Think about it. That's next on Fresh Outlook.